Okay, let's get started. Today I will take you through your first contribution to open source software, or at least an example of how it might look. I will briefly give an introduction to open source software so that we all know what we're talking about, and then I'll take you through the process, which is identify a problem, solve it, post it back, and wait for it to be merged. And then finally I'll give a brief summary of what to do with this. Okay, so open source software, what are we talking about here? It means that anybody can use the software that is provided in an open source project. The source code is available so that you can see how the program does what it does, or library. You can make your own versions of the code, you can make changes, and you can make suggestions back to the original code with changes for them to consider. And this specific workflow is what we'll be going through today. And this is very typical behavior in the Python data ecosystem, which is what I work in. And I'll just briefly mention the idea of cathedral versus bazaar, which is something that has been written about a lot. And you will find this compares monolithic software packages where everything is involved, often controlled by a single corporation, versus lots of people contributing lots of pieces of code to different projects, and all of them together make a complex web of applications and libraries that move the whole ecosystem forward. So open source is the bazaar, and it has been argued that it increases the quality of the code and the speed with which you can adapt to new things. Okay, how do you go about identifying a problem? First of all, if we're talking about the Python ecosystem, this will probably be happening on GitHub. You will want to look at libraries that you already know and understand, perhaps the libraries that you use in your everyday work, in your data science, if you're a data scientist, or data engineering, whatever it may be. Simplest thing that you might do is look through their documentation, add examples, fix typos, that kind of thing. Lots of people make their first contributions to open source like that because you're not going to actually break the library itself. However, you can also look in the issues. Again, this is on GitHub. I'll show you this in a moment. And look for things that are marked as first issues or help needed or something like that to give an indication that it's an appropriate place to start if you've never worked on it before. Particularly this term, good first issue, is something that's used by GitHub and Google Summer of Code and various things like that to indicate that beginners are welcome. You will want to find something where the problem is clearly explained, and ideally there's a way to test the problem included in that description. Here is an example of this. You will see on the right that this is marked as a good first issue here, so that's a label. And there is a description of what the problem is. This is in the intake library. We'll look at that in a moment. It tells you that somebody tried to pass a particular type of input to a function, and it gave an error as shown. And it provides a suggestion of how you might go about fixing it. So that's all very useful. This is how you actually go about working with open source contributions. You will want your own copy of the code, so you clone the repo. You will also want a copy of that repo on your personal GitHub account. You will want to have an appropriate environment for coding in. Often there are instructions in the repo as to what that environment should be for development work. And then you'll be coding. You will make fixes. You will make tests, not necessarily in that order. Often the test comes first because there is a recognized problem that you're trying to fix. Sometimes if you are making an improvement, you might make the fix first and then a test to show that it works. You will also want to make sure the tests are included, that they run, and that your code adheres to any style requirements in the repo, often called lints. So that's flake 8 and formatting, various things might be included there. You will commit your code. Maybe you will commit it many times. You see the arrows here. You might repeat this little section multiple times, and you will push your code to a branch on your own repo and create a pull request. So here is the intake repo on the intake org, and you will see that there is a button on the right here called fork. This is how you would copy it to your own personal account on GitHub. When working locally, you will do commands somewhere along these lines. You will clone the repo, you will move into that directory, you will add the newly forked repo as a remote source, you will check out a branch, and you will start to make commits. You will do formatting, you will do testing, and you will do more commits as necessary. Finally, you will push your code to the branch on your fork. Now, initially for this particular problem, which was about passing paths, here was the change that I first made, and we can have a look at this in a moment. It unfortunately didn't work, and this was revealed by failing tests, which is why I need to reinforce the idea tests are critical. Now, we'll actually follow this link to here. This is the pull request that I have made. You will see that there are multiple commits here, and it has been approved by one of the maintainers on this project. It just so happens I am also a maintainer on this project. It's good practice for you not to approve your own pull requests, but to have somebody else do it. There was some conversation here about this particular thing that I just showed you, which was not right, and we found a better way of doing it through conversation. So there is an approval, and the tests ran, and I got green marks everywhere here, which means that this is ready to be merged. When that happens, I press the button, and everything goes from green to purple, which means that this is done. So, moving on. When you do this kind of work, you will be interacting with open source maintainers and other contributors. Be respectful, obviously. You can expect them to be very helpful in their comments and their reviews on your code, especially if you explain that this is the first time you've done this, you're new to the project. Remember that the repos are maintained mostly by volunteers. Occasionally, some of them are paid to work on them, but generally speaking, you're talking with people who are doing this because they want to see good software be produced. So be nice, and people will be nice to you. This is what we expect. When people suggest you make changes, unless you have a really good reason that you shouldn't, and you can explain that reason, generally you will be making those changes, and hopefully you will agree and your pull request will be merged. So, a brief summary of everything that I've said. When you contribute to open source, it takes some getting used to. It really does. It's a way of working that you're probably not used to if you're in a corporation or academic setting. The changes that you make will be available to the public. It will be criticized, hopefully in a positive way. Don't worry, keep plugging away. You are talking to real people, and you share a common goal of making the software libraries better for the future. When you've done that, your contribution is included in one of the packages that you actually use, and you see it released. You can point people to this and say, hey, I helped out with this project. It's hugely satisfying. Not only that, if you want to have a data science or coding job in the future, this is a concrete example that you can be trusted to write good code. You can put these things onto your public profile, onto your CV. When you're applying jobs, it really helps you a lot. So I hope you will go ahead and start making changes on Intake or any other package that strikes your fancy. That's it from me. Thanks very much for watching.